like to welcome everybody. My name is Simon Levinson. I am the founder of Drawing America, and we're thrilled to offer technical support today for this incredible event for the Association of Print Scholars. If you'd like to find out more about how we can offer technical support for your online events, visit our website at drawingamerica.com. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the president of the Association of Print Scholars, Elisa German. So welcome, take it away.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon. My name is Elisa German, and I am the president of the Association of Print Scholars. And I'm very excited to welcome all of you to APS's 7th annual Distinguished Scholar Lecture. While many of you are already familiar with APS, I want to take a moment to briefly tell those of you who are joining us for the first time a little bit about our organization. Founded in 2014, the Association of Print Scholars is a nonprofit organization that aims to encourage innovative and interdisciplinary approaches to the history and practice of printmaking. We strive to facilitate dialogue and promote scholarship in the field by sponsoring a wide range of workshops, grants, awards, and events, such as today's lecture. With an active community of more than 500 members worldwide, including curators, artists, students, teachers, dealers, and independent scholars, we continue to grow our membership in an effort to create a truly active and diverse community of print enthusiasts. Anyone is welcome to join, and for those interested in doing so or learning more about APS, please visit our website at printscholars.org. Before we begin, I want to thank Simon Levinson of Drawing America for his help with the logistics of hosting this event virtually. I also want to say a quick word about the lecture itself. The lecture will span approximately 45 minutes, and we have reserved about 10 minutes after the lecture for questions. So please feel free to share your comments and inquiries in the chat or Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen throughout the talk. There should also be a live transcript feature at the bottom of your screen should you need to enable it. The lecture is being recorded and will be shared on APS's website and our YouTube channel. I will now turn things over to our Vice President, Galina Mardulovich, who will introduce our speaker for this afternoon. Thank you so much.
It is truly my honor to introduce Timothy Clark on behalf of the Association of Print Scholars as the speaker for this year's Distinguished Scholar Lecture. Mr. Clark is one of the world's leading experts in Japanese prints, drawings, and paintings. He is a specialist of the Edo period and the Meiji era, with a particular focus on the work of the artist Hokusai, about whom we will hear much today. Drawn to Japanese prints from an early age, thanks to a fortuitous gift by a family friend, Mr. Clark studied Japanese at Oxford University and later at Harvard and in Japan. When the British Museum was in the process of establishing its Japanese galleries, Mr. Clark joined the institution where he has worked since 1987. During his tenure at the British Museum, Mr. Clark oversaw a collection that grew to over 30,000 objects relating to Japan, and published numerous books and curated or co-curated just as many exhibitions on the subject. The latter includes such important shows as Shunga, Sex and Pleasure in Japanese Art, which opened in 2013, Manga in 2018, and Nara, Sacred Images from Early Japan in 2019. In 2017, he co-curated the critically acclaimed exhibition Hokusai, Beyond the Great Wave, which explored the richness and diversity of the artist's late work. And in 2018, Mr. Clark was responsible for the major reinstallation of the British Museum's Japanese galleries. Until 2019, he served as the head of the Japanese collections, and he is now the Honorary Research Fellow in the museum's Department of Asia. Mr. Clark is the recipient of numerous accolades, including the Robert and Lisa Sainsbury Fellowship by the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures. In 2020, he was awarded the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold Raised with Rosette by the Japanese government for his contribution to the understanding of Japanese culture in the United Kingdom. And in 2021, he was elected a fellow by the British Academy. Between 2016 and 2019, Mr. Clark served as Principal Investigator in the UK for the AHRC-funded international research project, Late Hokusai, Thought, Technique, and Society. In his lecture today, he will share more about that project, as well as speak about the incredible recent discovery of Hokusai's unrealized publishing venture, The Great Picture Book of Everything. Please join me, albeit virtually, in welcoming Timothy Clark.
Warm thanks to Elisa German, Galina Mardulovich, and the Association of Print Scholars for the kind invitation to talk to you today. Hello, I hope you are all well. Preparing this talk has been a welcome opportunity to summarize thinking about my work of the last couple of years. So thank you again. Some key points for the talk today. The Great Picture Book was a major project of Hokusai's later years, hitherto unknown or unrecognized. It provided the opportunity for Hokusai's imagination to range widely across time and space. For us, it's a chance to reconsider in detail the working method for creating a woodblock printed illustrated book. It helps to reconstruct further the range of intellectual and artistic ambitions of Hokusai's later career. And finally, we can savor 100 mini masterpieces of brush drawing and think about their powerfully expressive qualities. It's particularly this last point I'd like to emphasize. It was the thesis of our 2017 exhibition, Hokusai Beyond the Great Wave, that Hokusai developed increasingly expressive power in his late works, a sense of intense identification with the world, which he then offers back to us. I'd like to focus today on a late Hokusai topic that was completely unknown in 2017. His recently rediscovered block-ready drawings for the project, The Great Picture Book of Everything. This was the theme of a second Hokusai exhibition held at the British Museum at the end of last year. The poster featured a detail from what is already a small drawing. It shows the Taoist practitioner Zhu Sheng climbing a ladder of clouds to reach for the moon. The brush lines of his robe dance back and forth in a wonderfully eloquent way. If you're a print specialist, you will surely know the Prints and Drawings Gallery, Gallery 90, at the British Museum. This calm, contemplative space was kindly loaned by the Prints and Drawings Department. With its welcome shelf to lean on under each of the display windows, it furnished the perfect environment to look closely at the small drawings. Coming out of the lockdowns, people really seemed to respond to this intimate experience of close looking. The display was skillfully curated by my BM colleague, Alfred Haft, a native of New York City. The story began, for me, on the 10th of October 2019, when I was first shown the drawings by Israel Goldman, the well-known dealer in Japanese art. Excitedly, not quite believing what we were seeing, we laid out the 103 drawings on the table in the study room of the Japanese section. I climbed up the step ladder, metal, not clouds, and tried to take some photos with my phone that would show as many of the drawings as possible. Already we could see figure subjects, some apparently deities, animals, and birds. I was struck by the quirky energy that I've come to associate with late Hokusai art. I was literally having palpitations. Notice how each of the small working drawings has been carefully cut out and stuck onto an individual card for contemplation as a mini work of art. The order of the drawings as they came out of their box seemed random. When the working drawings were converted to the individual works of art, they were furnished with a purpose-made Paulownia wood storage box. The box is lined with beautifully marbled paper and has a sliding lid on which is written the title and artist in neatly brushed characters. Izzy Goldman is smiling here because I immediately concurred that the drawings are surely by Hokusai. They had been attributed at auction to his young pupil, Katsushika Isai, but we thought that was wrong. Now we needed to prove it. This is how the drawings have come to be catalogued. They were made by Hokusai for an illustrated book with the title, The Great Picture Book of Everything. There is evidence that the title in Japanese would have been pronounced Banmotsu Ehon Daizen in Hokusai's day. Each drawing is about 10.5 by 15.2 centimeters, a standard but somewhat unusual format for a small horizontal book. This is almost exactly the same dimensions as a modern picture postcard. Two of the drawings have in their margin the collector's seal of Henri Veveur, one of the great names of European collecting of Japanese art. In 2020, the drawings were acquired by the British Museum, funded by the Theresia Gerda Buch bequest, with generous support from Art Fund, the leading art charity in the UK. Note that for the exhibition last year, we suggested quite a broad range of date from the 1820s through the 1840s. That is, from the period which we had defined in 2017 as late Hokusai, corresponding to Hokusai's 60s, 70s, and 80s. More recent thinking is moving towards a narrower date in the early to mid 1840s, Hokusai's early to mid 80s. Drawing number 1, a kind of title page, gives a title, a date, and what purports to be the signature and seals of Hokusai. This title page gave me a lot of grief, not to say sleepless nights. I wanted to believe it, even though the particular use of the seals was odd. A date of 1829 would have satisfyingly filled what is generally thought of as a relatively empty period in Hokusai's career, after he'd come through a series of serious life challenges. Anyway, the paper of this one page turned out to be different from the paper used for the rest of the drawings. So, with expert advice from Asano Shugo in Japan, who's made a special study of the artist's seals, we've come to believe that this one page is fake. It gives the right title, the right artist, but the wrong date. The first thing I did when we came out of the second lockdown in the UK was to go into the BM and photograph the seals alongside their printed versions in 2 of Hokusai's illustrated books. The forger of the title page must have had real seals made based on the printed versions in the books. The logical suggestion is that owning a group of about 100 unsigned Hokusai working drawings, someone, maybe the commissioning publisher or their heirs, needed to furnish an authentication to be able to sell the drawings as a work of art. Initially, I fell for it, I'll admit. Moving on, happily, to Hokusai's genuine drawings, the subtitle page announces India and China. The representative figures from these 2 great civilizations are a Brahmin with a fly whisk and a Chinese boy with a fan. There are 2 subtitle pages with similar sorts of designs in the related group of Hokusai drawings at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which I'll introduce to you in a minute. India and China do provide a vital framework for understanding many of the BM 103 drawings. Nearly all of the sheets have careful corrections done on patches spliced into very thin paper of the support. We might call them pentimenti. Many similar corrections are found on the drawings in Boston. The title on the fake title page and some crucial advice from Akama Ryo and Ishigami Aki in Kyoto led presently to the realization that Hokusai's drawings were intended for a picture encyclopedia. Reference works of this kind had been common in Japan since the late 17th century, and before that, for many centuries in China. On the right is the most influential such work created in Japan in 1666, Kim Mo-zui, collection of images to enlighten the young. A comparison of Hokusai's drawing of a tiger and a leopard left with the equivalent page in the 1666 work is indicative. Hokusai takes his 2 subjects out of their separate, objectifying boxes and combines them into a narrative whole. The leopard is crouching submissively to the tiger. The way the tiger looks directly and intently out at us is a feature found in many other late Hokusai works, as we shall see. Let's look at some more picture encyclopedias. Professor Akama pointed me to the 1693 picture encyclopedia on the right. It has the same title as Hokusai's drawings, The Great Picture Book of Everything, but with the addition of Pocket Edition. The 2 small horizontal volumes of this now rare 1693 edition could literally be tucked into the hanging sleeve of a robe. Pocket is, of course, anachronistic. Depending on how you count them, there are more than 1,300 subjects covered in the 1693 edition, and many of these reappear in the BM and Boston Hokusai drawings. The organizing principles of the picture encyclopedias prove to be remarkably consistent over several centuries. These allow us to propose a tentative ordering for the BM and Boston Hokusai drawings. Shown here are figures from the standard category, people of various lands, as seen from the perspective of China and Japan. We know that picture encyclopedias were typically used to educate children, also as reference works by poets and artists. A lot of detail to take in here, apologies. This is the new structure proposed for the BM103 drawings as a result of our study. We've divided them into the broad categories of India and China, as signaled by the subtitle page, plus natural world. The percentages show that about 1/4 feature India, 1/2 show China and other lands, and the final quarter, the natural world. Below the blue dotted line are subjects already included in the picture encyclopedias of the 17th century. However, an expansion of interest in Chinese subjects had already begun by the end of the 18th century. As you probably know, it was forbidden for Japanese people to travel abroad in this period. There were no direct links with India, but the subcontinent was venerated as the source of the great Buddhist religion. Indian culture was mediated to Japan via China. Flourishing trade links with China via the port of Nagasaki were closely policed by the shogunate. There was a huge armchair interest, another anachronism, in foreign matters, which Hokusai and his publishers were tapping into. On the left are two of Hokusai's drawings featuring mythical semi-deities believed to have fostered human civilization in ancient China. Fu Shi, above, promoted music, here specifically inventing the qin, a kind of transverse harp. Shen Nong, below, was the god of agriculture, here shown with his hoe, benignly encouraging young lads to cook grains and prepare medicinal herbs. In the 1789 picture encyclopedia on the right, Fu Shi, Shen Nong, and other Chinese worthies are included in a supplementary volume of additional miscellaneous subjects. So I think Hokusai's project was intended to take this process further. Mid-career, during his 50s, Hokusai had already caused a sensation, of course, with his wildly popular serial publication, Hokusai Manga, Hokusai's Sketches. In the timeline on the right, we can see that this came out in fits and starts over a 64-year period. The final 3 posthumous volumes were increasingly being concocted by publishers from a variety of sources. Some of the subjects of the manga, here birds, later reappear in the Great Picture Book. Manga seems to have had little in the way of strict organizing principles, and that is part of its charm. The Great Picture Book, on the other hand, was surely intended to follow closely the precedent of the structure and order of the traditional picture encyclopedias. Notice here that the right page is printed with stronger black than the left-hand page. Due to the particular way in which traditional books were printed and bound, right and left pages were actually printed from different woodblocks, hence the variability sometimes found in the printing. A particular favorite drawing, among many other favorites, is this Buddhist subject of the compassionate Bodhisattva Kannon, Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, seated on the head of a coiling dragon. Dragons create rain, and although the robes of the deity are fluttering in the wind, Kannon's expression appears calm and profoundly meditative. Notice the subtlety of the gradation of the edge of the storm clouds, and how a slight opacity is implied around the circumference of the halo. The deity's face is no larger than a thumbnail. When viewed at normal distance, the facial features coalesce beautifully, but when viewed in magnification, we can see that those features have actually been delicately formed by linking a lot of much smaller brushstrokes. The sensitivity of this is amazing. The dragon appears almost world-weary. It has the intensity of expression I've already described as a feature of late Hokusai's art. Each of the drawings is inscribed with handwritten characters brushed, we assume, by Hokusai. The first task in analyzing the content of the drawings was to transcribe all the inscriptions, figure out how they should be read and what they mean. In the traditional picture encyclopedias, the inscriptions typically name the subject, often several different ways. So they also have the function of a kind of thesaurus. In the case of the India and China drawings, the inscriptions are often more discursive, giving a tiny potted history of the episode depicted. The ideal project for first lockdown was, therefore, to create the mother of all spreadsheets. I received a lot of welcome help via email from Yasuhara Akio and Alfred Haft, who you will meet soon. Analyzing the inscriptions was one important task. Another was to analyze the many motifs depicted and to search for examples of similar subjects in other late works by Hokusai. From the 1810s onwards, Hokusai was preeminent in what can be called art books. Hokusai Manga is the most famous example. Hokusai's album Drawn True to Life, Left, aspired to be particularly painterly inasmuch as it sets out to reproduce in woodblock the variegated brush lines and wash effects of a brush painting. Brush paintings are typically in vertical hanging scroll format. So here you have to turn the book around to view dragon head canon in the appropriate format. The printed version on the left is impressive, but lacks the delicacy and introspection of the later drawing on the right. Coincidentally, both works were once owned by Henri Verveur. Perhaps the greatest painting in the 2017 Hokusai exhibition was Dragon in Rain Clouds, completed in the last few months of Hokusai's life when he was 90. Close encounters with that amazing work, now in the collection of the Musée Guimet in Paris, are indelibly printed on my psyche. Encountering the block-ready drawing, 1/10 the size, in 2019, immediately made me want to compare the two works. The 90-year-old dragon has an intensity not matched by any other work by Hokusai. But a detail from the block-ready drawing, the length of my thumb, creditably stands comparison. The dragons are not in this case looking directly at us. They are definitely looking intently at something though. There is an intelligent consciousness behind the eyes which insists on communication. I've elsewhere described such images as a kind of psychic self-portrait of Hokusai. Looking slowly at the 90-year-old dragon scroll painting for a long time, we came to the conclusion that, staggeringly, it is painted in reverse. That is, the artist began with the highlights, sometimes unpainted paper, and worked his way through progressively darker shades of ink until he finished with jet black lines. There is also some iridescent dark blue in the storm clouds. I've turned the image on the right anti-clockwise through 90 degrees to show the similar approach to describing what I think are the shadows between the scaly plates of the dragon's underside. In the painting on the left, you can see the progress from unpainted paper through grays to the deep black of the shadows between the plates. The marks in the detail on the right are simple flicks or squiggles made with a relatively dry brush. Each is unique and expressive. If I was a block cutter, I'd be getting worried whether I would be capable of rising to the challenge of reproducing this effect in woodblock. The subtle gradation of the storm cloud is also challenging, as we shall see. The final section of the 2017 exhibition, Immortality, featured painted works done by Hokusai during his last 3 years, from the ages of 88 to 90. This was the spiritual culmination of the exhibition. Bringing together these sublime paintings was a prime motivation for the whole project. To the left of Dragon in Rain Clouds is its pair, Tiger in Rain, now in the Auto Memorial Museum in Tokyo. It's unfortunate that in this photo, light is reflecting on the glass, obscuring the snarling tiger. You can see that I'm working to put the drawings for the Great Picture Book in their appropriate place within the sequence of late Hokusai works. Back to the drawings, some more favorites. This one imagines the origins of booze in ancient China, specifically rice wine. Two men are locking their ankles to stop themselves falling off a beam, which is being used to crush a sack of rice. The third man directs the resulting rice juice into a channel. In so many of the drawings, Hokusai delights in showing us a figure from behind who appears, nonetheless, to be completely intent on what they are doing. In the UK, we describe an implausible mechanism or process like this as Heath Robinsonish, but maybe that does not compute in the US. From the episodes set in India around the time of the founding of the Buddhist religion, about the 5th to 4th century BC, comes this magical image of King Shutasoma, Fume Choja in Japanese, calmly conjuring up the 9-tailed spirit fox, apparently summoning it with the scroll he holds in one raised hand. The softness of the fox's tails is ineffable among the billowing clouds. Again, this will be a major challenge for the block cutter to reproduce in woodblock. In fact, there is a related image by Hokusai in one of his picture books of warriors, Ehon Wakan no Homare. The designs were made, and maybe the blocks also cut, by 1836, but the book was not then published until 1850, the year after Hokusai's death. The second half of the 1830s was a period of economic dislocation following the Great Famine of the Tempo era. Notice that in the impression of the book, formerly owned by Jack Hillier, right, there is an intermediate grey block in addition to the black key block. See also how the edge of the cloud has been subtly rendered using the skilled technique of ita bokashi, or block gradation. The rough leaf of a rush was used to sand away the sharp edge of the printing block so as to print this subtle gradation. Subjects from the natural world were a great forte of Hokusai throughout his career, and increasingly so in his old age. I'm told these must be street cats because they do not have the collars that pet animals would customarily wear. There certainly seems to be a standoff in progress. Once again, notice how the facial features of the cat have been drawn extremely sensitively with lots of small brushstrokes joined together, quite like the technique used for the face of Bodhisattva Kannon in an earlier slide. I'd now like to bring into the story a fascinating album of preliminary sketches by Hokusai preserved at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. It is known as the Curtis album, as it was bequeathed by the US collector Atherton Curtis. Among about 150 late period preparatory sketches and fragments in what is essentially a scrapbook, there are 6 that relate to the BM's 103 drawings for the Great Picture Book, and 12 which relate to the 178 pages of drawings in the Boston Museum, which I believe are part of the same overall project. I'll show a couple of the Boston drawings in a moment. The Paris album formerly belonged to Hokusai's young pupil, Katsushika Isai, and this is part of the reason why the BM 103 drawings were mistakenly attributed to Isai at auction. One of the most dramatic of the drawings shows Virudhaka, a king in ancient India, being killed by a lightning bolt in the middle of a victory banquet. Virudhaka was an enemy of the Buddha and his family, the Shaka clan, and the Buddha had foretold this death. On the left is a preliminary sketch in Paris, and on the right, the finished block-ready drawing, Hanshitae, in London. The block-ready drawing was intended to be pasted face down onto the cherrywood printing block. The block cutter then cut through the back of the drawing to leave tiny ridges of wood in relief that would print the lines of the image. So normally the block-ready drawing is destroyed to make the print. The eagle-eyed among you will spot some major differences in the billowing drapery on the right side. The red lead brushstrokes in the preparatory sketch on the left were surely put there to help Hokusai navigate the complexity of leaving unpainted the white flashes of the explosion where they cross the limbs and drapery of the figure. Recently, discussion has revived about whether copyists were employed to work up drawings by famous ukiyo-e artists. This is a suggestion which Ellis Tinios and I have debated and both strongly reject. The whole excitement of an ukiyo-e woodblock print or book illustration derives from the block cutter's skill at reproducing the actual brushstrokes of the artist. Please notice the small diamond-shaped red seal applied over the bottom right corner of the preparatory sketch. This is the tiny manji seal used occasionally by Hokusai in his 80s. As well as authenticating the drawing, it surely also served to stop someone stealing individual drawings from the scrapbook. The same small red manji seal was applied by Hokusai to this famous letter of 1842, in which he includes an engaging self-portrait, signed with his age given as 83. The content of the letter is relevant to our story. Hokusai seems to have sent the letter together with a collection of old sketches made some 40 years earlier. Perhaps the recipient was a publisher and the old sketches were intended as consolation for a commission Hokusai was currently unable to supply. This was not an isolated instance, particularly in the artist's later years. As we'll see, he seems to have worked periodically on drawings for the Great Picture Book in parallel with all kinds of other work. Another crucial link is with a group of 178 block-ready drawings by Hokusai in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Hitherto untitled, it seems definite from their content that the Boston drawings are another substantial part of the Great Picture Book of Everything. The Boston drawings are pasted into 3 volumes of what we've called a publisher's mock-up, which has printed outlines, like the projected book. Many of the BM drawings have vestiges of printed outlines around their edges, too. The previous slide showed a subtitle page from one of the 3 volumes in Boston. It turns out that the subjects listed derive from the traditional picture encyclopedias, which, as we have seen, had been popular in Japan since the late 17th century and long before that in China. Though only rediscovered in Boston in the late 1990s, it is highly likely that the drawings came from the huge collection of Japanese art donated to the Boston Museum by William Sturgis Bigelow. Bigelow did most of his collecting in Japan in the 1880s. Here is a complete page opening from the Boston mock-up volumes, from the section on dragons and fish. The block-ready drawings on incredibly thin paper would later have been disassembled and pasted onto cherrywood printing blocks for cutting. So they would have been destroyed had this major publishing project gone ahead. As I just said, most of the BM's 103 related drawings have vestiges of similar printed black borders, which suggests that the BM works had also reached the stage of being pasted into a mock-up volume before the project was aborted. There are a few patches of repairs on these 2 pages, just like on many of the BM drawings. Finally, notice that the vertical composition on the left page has to be turned on its side to fit into this horizontal format of book. I strongly recommend to you Sarah Thompson's beautiful facsimile edition of the 178 Boston drawings, Hokusai's Lost Manga. Although published as recently as 2016, it now seems quite hard to come by. The Japanese translation was published in 2017, and I found both editions enormously useful. Thank you, Sarah. I'd now like to touch briefly on what we know of Hokusai's personal circumstances in his later years. This sketch was made from memory by a Hokusai pupil, Tsuyuki Kosho, probably some 50 years after the events portrayed. Hokusai is shown intently painting, wrapped in a quilt, while his artist daughter Eijo looks on. She is generally referred to by her artist name, Oi. Father and daughter are living in a rundown rented house littered with discarded food wrappers and charcoal packaging. We are informed that the quilt is riddled with lice. The habitual squalor of their living conditions late in Hokusai's life is attested to by several of the sources recorded in the first major biography of Hokusai, Katsushika Hokusai Den of 1893 by Iijima Kyoshin. The fact that Iijima interviewed quite a few people who remembered actually meeting Hokusai is admirable. However, biography inevitably fosters an image of Hokusai which emphasizes his relative isolation and the lowly living conditions of his later years. It was not always so. Oi had returned to live with her father in the late 1820s, leaving a failed marriage to another artist. As far as we know, Hokusai and Oi lived together for the remaining 20 years or so of Hokusai's life. Oi was an accomplished artist, but there are very few works signed with her own signature, almost nothing from the 1830s, which was one of the busiest periods of Hokusai's career. So the debate grows about how much Oi might have been contributing to the family art business, not just as studio assistant, but likely as collaborator. We'll return to this issue in a minute. The sign on the wall warns visitors, I or we categorically refuse to paint albums or fans. Basically, no autograph hunters. But if we go back a few decades, a rather more socially connected image of Hokusai can be inferred. In the 1810s, for instance, a number of Hokusai illustrated books credit some of his followers as collating pupils, Kyogo Monjin. In the cities of Edo, Nagoya, and Osaka, Hokusai, then in his 50s, seems actively to be promoting the names of these pupils to the public. This genial painting from the middle of the 1820s features the 7 lucky gods. Each god is painted, signed, and sealed by a different pupil. And the way the figures overlap or collide suggests that all the contributing artists were likely present at the same event. Hokusai's own contribution is deliberately enigmatic. In place of the deity Bishamon, normally shown as a fierce Chinese warrior, we have just his helmet and spear hanging from and resting against a gnarled old pine tree. Personnalité de l'artiste absent. Maybe Hokusai is now saying that his pupils have established their independence and he doesn't need to watch over them anymore. Our international research project, Late Hokusai Thought Technique Society, officially ran from 2016 to 2019 and was generously funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council of the UK. Much of the research was conducted as a group. This photo was taken in the summer of 2017 at the time of the BM exhibition. From left to right, Alfred Haft, Matsuba Ryoko, Stephanie Sanchi, Angus Lockyer, Dominic Oldman, and myself, all of us at the time either BM or SOAS staff. 6 of the 7 lucky gods, with absent Hokusai hopefully guiding our stumbling footsteps. Here is the list of official institutional partners around the world. Other museums and individuals participated as the project developed. The key collaboration for the 2017 exhibition was with Asano Shugo, leading scholar of floating world art in Japan and a specialist in Hokusai paintings. Dr. Asano has continued to share his wise thoughts on how we should interpret the drawings for the Great Picture Book. Angus Lockyer, a historian of modern Japan, then teaching at SOAS, University of London, took the lead in framing our research questions. This photo, showing some of our colleagues based in Tokyo, many of them at Gakushuin University, emphasizes that 90% of the research about Hokusai has been generated in Japan, and 100% of the primary sources are written in the Japanese language. Everyone has shared most generously their knowledge and expertise. In 2015, the late Roger Keyes, leading Hokusai scholar, generously donated to the research project at the British Museum the hard copy of the monumental catalogue raisonné of the 3,000 or so prints designed by Hokusai, which he compiled over many years together with the late Peter Morse. Izumi Thomas was one of a team of volunteers organized by Art Research Center, Ritsumeikan University, to digitize the 90 large volumes of text with about 5,000 accompanying photographic prints. Very sadly, Roger passed away at the end of 2020. We miss him so much. The book published in 2021 about the BM's Hokusai drawings is dedicated to Roger's memory. The key to Roger Keyes' research method was his analysis of progressive damage to the key block used to print an ukiyo-e print. This is one of the earliest great wave impressions in the world, preserved at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Roger described this as state 2, taking the term state from Western print connoisseurship. And this seems to be one of the latest impressions of the great wave in the world, one of several impressions at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Roger apparently did not know this impression, so it should probably be numbered after state 21, which is the latest state described in Roger's catalogue. I'd like to pay particular tribute here to 2 online collaborators I've worked with on the 103 Hokusai drawings during the lockdowns. Yasuhara and Akio and I have never met in person, but through our mutual friendship with Roger Keyes, we collaborated to decipher the inscriptions and interpret the sometimes obscure subjects. Akio reads Chinese, which is very handy because I don't. Amazingly, he has made an annotated English translation of the key Hokusai biography of 1893, previously mentioned. Ellis Tinios researches and publishes on Japanese prints and illustrated books. He really helped to visualize the nitty-gritty of how the drawings would have been used to make an illustrated book. Hitherto, the most important example of the survival of block-ready drawings by Hokusai has been the case of the series 100 poems by 100 poets, explained by the nurse, of the mid-1830s. After 27 color woodblock prints were produced by 2 successive publishers in 1835-6, publication ground to a halt. This was likely due to economic dislocation caused by the Tempo famine. Nevertheless, the artist seems to have continued to make drawings up until at least 1838. 63 designs are recorded. In the standard oban, that is large sheet format, the size is roughly 4 times the individual pages of the Great Picture Book. Also, the drawings are designed with the intention that multiple colors will be added in the finished print. They are somewhat different in aesthetic, therefore, from book illustrations that were planned to be monochrome or have just one additional gray tone. When we staged an online event about 6 months ago about late Hokusai drawings, Asano Shugo presented an extremely intriguing idea about the surviving drawings from the 100 Poets series. Asano pondered whether Hokusai and Oi might have been collaborating closely to produce the drawings for the series, sometimes taking individual responsibility, sometimes collaborating within a single drawing. Asano is tentatively proposing that there is a busy, highly inflected style of drawing lines and dots, such as seen here in the trees, which is more characteristic of late Hokusai. In contrast, the drawings which Asano describes as more Oi-like in style, there are a lot more long attenuated brush lines, such as seen here along the sides of the boat and in the swell on the water. This is a radical and exciting theory which specialists will now need to think through and consider the further implications of. Here is one of the 100 Poet designs that was issued as a completed color print. You see how essentially brilliant colors have been added into black outlines that reproduce the artist's block-ready drawing. As expressed in the caption here, maybe we should henceforth be crediting this series to Hokusai and or Oi, ? As part of my personal research on the block-ready drawings for the Great Picture Book, I undertook some detailed stylistic analysis and comparison among the BM 103 drawings, the 178 Boston drawings, and the 63 surviving drawings for the 100 Poets print series. This had two important ambitions. First, to confirm that the various groups of drawings were indeed done by the same artist, or pair of collaborating artists, if we include Oi. Second, to try to figure out how the three groups might relate chronologically to one another. Here, the subject is steep rock faces with vegetation. The three examples on the right are all from the 100 Poets series and show that even within the same series, the artist or artists don't wish to repeat themselves exactly, even though the approach to form is broadly the same. I should repeat here that the overall format of the BM drawing on the left is roughly 1/4 the size of the other three. Here we have details of limpets on rocks beside water. The left detail is from a BM drawing, the right from one of the Boston drawings. The similarity of the mannerisms of style is pretty clear. Here we compare a complete BM page on the left with a complete Boston page on the right. The tangling of the plants, the angle from which they are shown, and the line quality itself all appear very close. In the traditional picture encyclopedias, each plant is separated out as an objective botanical specimen. Here, Hokusai takes us subjectively right in among the plants themselves, living organisms that radiate energy. The rationale for combining the four plants on the left seems to be that they are all culinary herbs and spices: pepper, perilla, saffron, and clove. The previous three comparisons have demonstrated similarities of style and approach to form. But what about date? We know that the 100 Poet drawings were done around 1835 to 1838, when Hokusai was in his later 70s. Of similar date is the book illustration of a Chinese lion shown on the left here, from a book of model designs for craftspeople, published in 1836. In her brilliant essay, The Power of Hokusai's Line, for the 2017 exhibition catalogue, Mitsubishi Ryoko demonstrated just how much further the artist went with his experiments in line in the works of his 80s. The lion on the right is found in Hokusai's final book, his testament divulging the secrets of how to paint, published just the year before he died. We know that the book on the left was cut by Egawa Tomikichi, Hokusai's block cutter of choice. We do not know who cut the book on the right, but the idiosyncrasies of each and every brushstroke are pronounced. This was even more challenging to reproduce in woodblock. Many thanks also to Mitsubishi Ryoko for this slide. Just before Christmas 2019, she alerted me that she'd found a reference to the Great Picture Book in one of Hokusai's letters. The letter is not extant. Thankfully, it was transcribed in Ijiwa's 1893 biography of Hokusai, What a great Christmas present. The letter thanks the publisher Suzambo, that is Kobayashi Shinbei, for payment of 3 bu as the fee for 3 sheets of drawings, so 6 pages, for the great picture book of everything. 3 bu is quite a lot of money. 4 bu equals 1 ryo. Traditionally, 1 ryo should buy enough rice to feed someone for a year, so equivalent perhaps to a few $100s. Hokusai gives his address as Araicho. He is thought to have lived there in 1845. Then Kubota Kazuhiro kindly forwarded to me an old photograph of a second letter, which says a very similar thing. 2.5 bu for 2.5 sheets of drawings for the great picture book. The Suzambo publishing house specialized in books relating to China. About 40 letters by Hokusai and 3 by Oi are currently known. This is surely only a fraction of a percent of all the letters they must have written during Hokusai's long, busy working life. Hokusai needed to be a businessman as well as an artist. Challengingly, very few of the letters record the year in which they were written. Circumstantial evidence suggests that these 2 letters were likely written in 1844 and 1845. At the time of this second letter, the Great Picture Book seems to have been planned as a 3-volume picture book. We need to consider further how these letters relate to the 103 drawings in London and the 178 drawings in Boston. While we're on the subject of Hokusai's letters, there is this illuminating example, perhaps from 1833, in which the artist complains directly to a leading block cutter, Sugita Kinsuke, about the way in which Sugita has been carving the eyes and noses of Hokusai's figures. We do not need a line along the underpart of the eye. Recently, these eyes and noses have been very popular, but I really, really hate them. Hokusai forbids him from cutting the faces in the style of the rival Utagawa school. Here's a drawing I can really relate to: poets enjoying the pleasures of boating. Who wouldn't want to be the man contentedly reading at the hatch of the roof of his boat, which he refers to as his floating home? As described before, the 3 other figures are all eloquently expressive and intent on what they're doing, even though they are shown from behind. There's a strong communality of style among the boating poets, and the illustrations of Chinese figures in Hokusai's book, Wakan Inshitsuden, published in 1840. We don't know who cut the blocks for Wakan Inshitsuden, but the book gives a very good idea of how the boating poets might have looked had the Great Picture Book actually been published. The drawing includes a mid-tone of grey in some of the drapery. In the printed version below, you can see how this is translated by the block cutter into strips of solid black around the collars and hems of the robes. Notice also in the detail of the man digging, bottom left, how the edge of the hole in the mud has been abraded so as to print a gradated effect. We saw a similar technique used earlier in the book illustration of the 9-tailed spirit fox flying off amid clouds. In this intense painting from 1846, Hokusai's 85th year, Shoki, the queller of demons, stands ramrod straight as the wind plays at his trailing robes. He's done in red to ward off sickness. There was a smallpox epidemic in Edo at the time the scroll was painted, surely to commission. This intensity of communication with the viewer is a quality I've mentioned already as typical of Hokusai's last works. The same intensity comes across from faces in 2 of the Great Picture Book drawings, which also feature Chinese warriors staring straight out at us. I'm working systematically to track the correspondences among Hokusai's late paintings and the drawings in this way. 5 types of aquatic bird paddle around and dive down into the pondweed. As in many of the 103 drawings, Hokusai brings the motifs staringly close together, threatening to collide them like dodgem cars. As with the plants earlier, subjects that were separated out in the traditional picture encyclopedias are brought together in lively interaction. There's a particular reason that it is so wonderful now to have this drawing preserved in the British Museum. Ducks in flowing water, left, painted in 1847 at the age of 88, is one of the great treasures of the rich Hokusai holdings at the British Museum. The effects of light reflecting from the ripples that eddy towards us are mesmerizing, techniques that are revolutionary and experimental in Japanese art of the time. The same quizzical mallard duck stares out at us, as in the drawing, while his companion dives for pondweed. We're invited to pause and savor the moment. Hokusai gives instructions on how to layer the pigments for a little grebe and a similar mallard in his final painting manual of 1848. Right. The accumulating evidence is pointing increasingly towards a date of early to mid 1840s for the 103 drawings, when Hokusai was in his early to mid 80s. As a coda to my talk, I'd like to mention briefly the BM's innovative online research platform called ResearchSpace. Part of our Hokusai research project was to explore the potential of this powerful semantic web-based tool to represent in new ways the new knowledge that we were creating. It's still very much a pilot, but in conjunction with the recent physical exhibition of the 103 drawings at the BM, Dominic Oldman and his team created an online version within ResearchSpace. Not only does the virtual version mirror the structure of the actual exhibition and reproduces its painstakingly interpreted texts, it also finds ways to represent the rich clusters of other works by Hokusai, which relate to each individual drawing in the show. Here, we are at the beginning of the exhibition online. You can see a gallery plan bottom right, which helps to orient the viewer. The works are presented in the same groupings and in the same order as if you were taking a tour around the actual gallery. This is the final section of the exhibition featuring drawings that depict the natural world. Display case 29, selected from the list on the left side, includes the drawing of the aquatic birds. Here is a so-called knowledge map, which has been generated around the drawing of the aquatic birds, here highlighted inside the blue box at center top. The slides, or cards as they are known, have been manually arranged by the researcher, who can also easily change their relative sizes. The connecting arrows are automatically generated from the links which have been inputted previously. Many of the cards connect through to metadata about the objects. In this detail of the previous, you can appreciate the wonderful intricacy of the system. Under each detail of an inscription or motif, you have all of the annotations, Chinese characters, translation, transcription, and also a subject listing where relevant. On the right side, you can see the beginnings of the connections to other related works by Hokusai, which theoretically could spread off into infinity. All knowledge is connected. And I put a little smiley face there. All knowledge is connected, smiley face. So why was Hokusai's The Great Picture Book of Everything never published? Here are some interim thoughts. Were there health reasons, economic reasons? Was Hokusai simply too busy? Was the project too large and unwieldy to bring to completion, especially when expanded to include more about India and China? We know that Hokusai was demanding about the quality of block cutting he required. Some of his late drawings were becoming increasingly painterly, and could these have become impossible to realize as woodblock printed images? Or was it simply too expensive for publishers to engage the block cutters who could do this work? And some more questions. Will we ever be able to figure out how much Oi was involved? Will we ever be able to separate her hand from Hokusai's? Who wrote the inscriptions? Were they all written by Hokusai, or were some written by someone else? What is the date or range of dates of the MFA and BM groups of drawings? Were the MFA drawings perhaps done in the late 1830s and the BM drawings in the early to mid 1840s? This is the thinking of Asano-san, Dr. Asano, in the online event about 6 months ago. If you'd like to explore all of the 103 drawings reproduced actual size, there is a handsome volume published in 2021 by British Museum Press, and I'm pleased to report that the Japanese language translation of this book has just been published by Asahi Shimbun Shippan in Tokyo. And here are a couple of web addresses where you can explore more. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was really wonderful. And we already have one question in the chat. And we actually also had one comment during your talk, which said, beautiful and informative presentation. Thank you for this expansive detail. So the first question that we have is on the process of painting depth in reverse, which you discussed on the example of the, the dragon among the clouds hanging scroll. Does the, pardon my pronunciation, AHRC-funded contain any corresponding information which describes that particular painting technique? Thank you in advance.
Brilliant question, thank you. And it gives me a chance to mention a little bit more about AHRC-funded, Essence of Coloring. This was the book which I mentioned was published just a year before Hokusai died. 2 volumes came out of a projected 4, but sadly Hokusai obviously died before the volumes 3 and 4 could be issued. The quick off the top of my head answer is no, I don't think there's anything mentioned about this process of drawing in reverse, but it is staggering. And the reason it took, it's a theory at the moment, the reason it took so long for us to suggest this was that, with the layering of Japanese pigments on a traditional painting, it is quite hard sometimes to see the order in which the layers have been applied, especially when some of these are washes. So where the final dark lines applied under or over the washes. But we became pretty convinced that, it's just impossible to get my head around it, but going from unpainted paper through gray washes, increasingly dark, and then finishing with the black to give that incredible 3-dimensional sense of the dragon's body writhing amid the storm clouds. But it really does seem to have been the technique for that particular painting and probably for other paintings of similar subjects.
Great. Another question we have for you, Tim, and again, just to echo Elisa, thank you so much. That was so incredible to hear about this research and phenomenal to think about this unrealized, perhaps, publishing venture.
Finally realized.
Well, yes, exactly. Yes, it is. Yeah, 2021 and just now in Japanese, which is incredible. Do you have kind of more insights or any insights into the selection of the particular subjects or themes? And the kind of a related question is, do you think there's any link to popular trends at the time, given the kind of question of dating of these drawings?
Thank you for your question. These are all giving me the opportunity to say even more.
Great.
In the book, if you're interested, I go in much more detail about the probable order of the subjects of the Hokusai drawings in Boston and then the group in London, and how these correlate to the order of the traditional subjects in the 17th century picture encyclopedias. One interesting aspect to this is people were saying, well, what percentage of the possible project did the Boston and BM drawings represent? My rough estimate, based on the size of the 17th century encyclopedias, is that the combined London and Boston drawings come to about 1/4, potentially, of what could have been, the full picture encyclopedia. Maybe 2 volumes for the London drawings and 3 volumes for the Boston drawings. The Boston drawings happily are stuck into publishers' mock-ups, and we can argue about the order of the 3 volumes, but basically we know the order that was intended very close to publication. The BM drawings, of course, were random when they arrived, and part of our work was trying to figure out a sensible arrangement, kind of logical arrangement for them. And it may not be that that's exactly what Hokusai intended, but it was just a useful way of organizing them. But maybe that is ultimately the reason why the drawings were never published, because it was a vast project and only maybe 1/4 had been completed. And would it make sense to publish just 3 volumes on a fraction of the subjects? Would you want an Encyclopedia Britannica, which only had 2 volumes out of 20?
I'll take it, but yeah.
Maybe just as a follow-up to that question, we were also wondering about, you said that the order was important for these picture encyclopedias. So do you think that means that they were sort of predetermined from the beginning of the project what it would be and drawn in order? Or do you think it still was just kind of a more fluid process for the artist?
There are a lot of moving parts to this argument. Lots of variables, which I can't juggle to save my life. either physically or mentally, and that's what one has to try and do, because one change of idea changes your thinking about other aspects of the project. I'm using that as an excuse to not answer your question very successfully. It was important in the 17th century in Japan, following much older precedent in China, that you start with heavenly phenomena, and then you work your way through man, landscape, down. There's a wonderful category called useful things, and it's by far the biggest category in all of the encyclopedias in China and Japan. Useful things, and that takes you into just about everything. Any physical object in the world around us is drawn and named.
Wow.
Drawn, named, and sometimes named several times. So it functions, as I said, as a thesaurus.
Yeah.
So if Hokusai was going to follow the order of the traditional picture encyclopedias, yes, that would have been fixed. But the wild card, as I was mentioning in the talk, is that China seems to have expanded quite a lot by the time we get to the Hokusai drawings. But that process had definitely begun at the end of the 18th century in just one of the examples I showed. So I think that could be the explanation for why in the BM group you've got a lot of drawings relating to China, some relating to ancient India, and then a quarter of them which are completely normal for the traditional picture encyclopedias. Are you following that? Sorry.
Yes.
No.
Complicated.
I think we have a new question in the chat, Galina.
Yes, Sheila Fox is saying, or she wrote, you suggested that Hokusai wanted to distinguish himself from the other styles of these competitors. It's hard to imagine that the styles would have been so different. Is there evidence that Hokusai gave his specific objections to other styles?
That letter, which I quoted briefly from, led Ellis Tinios, the Prince scholar who I mentioned, to a wonderful discovery in one of the books published of Hokusai's drawings in the middle of the 1830s. Again, it's a book of an anthology of Chinese poetry of the Tang Dynasty, illustrated with Hokusai's scenes. And Hokusai complains about the way a specific page has been carved by the block carver. And there was a little line in the letter there which said, don't carve with an extra line along the underside of the eye. And amazingly, Ellis, who explores many different editions of the books, found a very early printing where there was a line at the bottom of the eye. And then he found a later corrected edition where that line had been taken away. And you could see that a plug had been put into the wooden block to recarve the face as it was. So that's an amazing concrete example following Hokusai's letters and complaints, where we can see that corrections were made for subsequent printings of the book. Hello, Ellis, if you're there and listening.
That's incredible.
Well, sort of talking about that a little bit more, this relationship between the artist and the block cutter, some of these drawings are just so incredibly expressive and really personal in the way that they're done with all the shading and the detail. You have to wonder sort of what the consideration was in terms of legibility, because if you're talking about something that would have had wide use and wide reference, how do you think that sort of entered into things? Because again, they do seem so personal to some extent and expressive. So how do you think that negotiation?
I think there's two parts to your question. One is perhaps the technical complexity of the block cutter trying to reproduce what Hokusai put on the paper. And just to re-emphasize, I think the whole excitement of the Hokusai prints comes from the skill of the block cutter managing to reproduce the excitement of the line that Hokusai put onto the paper. If the line Hokusai puts on the paper is not exciting, you will not get an exciting print. It's impossible. Which is perhaps a bit different from many reproductive prints in the Western tradition. I mean, many experts among the audience. But I showed in almost my final slide a detail of one of the Hokusai drawings. It was the tail of a bird of paradise. And the feathers of the bird of paradise were crossing each other in a kind of tangle. And if you tried to cut that just as a single block, I mean, you would shoot yourself or go blind. it's theoretically possible that you cut two blocks, one for the lines in that direction and the other's block for the lines that cross them. Either way, it's incredibly complicated. And as I was working on the talk, thinking more and more about, was Hokusai actually making his drawings much more painterly? I mean, this requires a whole other lecture to demonstrate, but we know that in the last few years of his life, certainly in the last 3 years of his life, he abandoned pretty much everything else to concentrate on painting and to write this testimony of techniques of painting. So I'm thinking, can you fit the 103 drawings from the BM into a larger trajectory where Hokusai is perhaps even emotionally moving away increasingly from printmaking, book illustrations and prints, towards a pure realm of painting that he really wants to be sure to explore while he still has time on this earth. And that brings you into the more emotional side of his choice of subjects and his treatment of those subjects. And I didn't show you enough examples of the 103 drawings, but there are quite a few in which the more I look at them, more I feel a kind of strong emotional quality coming from them, both in terms of the content, but also the way that the forms are arranged. You could say it's a kind of mannerist style, which is intended to emphasize its expressionism of a certain kind. And I think this is something that it's very interesting to feed into the weave of the late Hokusai story, which is why I'm working through the later paintings and seeing what correspondences you can draw out.
Thank you.
I think that actually builds very nicely into, I think, maybe our last question, unless people have more questions. But yeah, what are the next steps in this project, both in terms of these drawings and your own research that you're, I mean, is it thinking about this role of painting? And I mean, it's really fascinating to me to think about that, because so many of us know of Hokusai through the prints, it's very fascinating to hear these kind of complex relationships between how Hokusai creates the drawings to be translated to prints, but then clearly making it harder and harder and harder as he goes for the woodcutters. But yeah, what are the next steps?
Well, of course, the first thing I want to do is go out and find the other 3/4 of the drawings.
Yes.
Joke.
Well, anyone
who's listening.
Yeah, please, if you find them, bring them to my attention. Right now, I am working on finishing the edits to what you could say is the scholarly volume, which comes out of our research project. I mean, an amazing collaboration, a very generous collaboration from 20 scholars around the world who've authored essays on different aspects of Hokusai's later career. And I'm really just finally bringing all those together. And we expect it to be published sometime next year from the British Museum Research Publication Series. It's called Late Hokusai Thought Technique Society, and then we've added Legacy, because it's become very clear as we've been studying as a group that so much of what we know about Hokusai comes from after the period of his death. I mean, that's obvious in some ways, but we can't just present the phenomenon of Hokusai from within the boundaries of his lifetime, ending in 1849. It becomes even more interesting as we explore how the image of him, how his legacy has been developed in so many different ways by different people, sometimes through forgery. Forging his works is a way of getting them out into the world, albeit a confusing one. So that research volume is very much in my in tray, hopefully soon to be in my out tray. But Hokusai, as I keep saying, is far too big for one scholar to be able to manage. I mean, I'm sure that's true of many great artists around the world. And I hope that this big research project with lots of people involved will really serve as the next stage for younger scholars who might want to take over and explore different aspects of Hokusai's career. We want the research volume to be suggestions for what to do next.
I love it.
I think you've definitely done that with this talk today. I think you've inspired absolutely everyone in attendance, and I can't thank you enough for agreeing to participate as our lecturer for this year.
Yes, and then in the chat, just to kind of echo everyone saying thank you for a wonderful, insightful talk. And Catherine Sullivan said, such welcome scholarship and generous detail, bringing new and historic information for current discourse, a wonderful example of scholarly collaboration. So everyone's very, very grateful, as are we, for you sharing all of these insights. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye. Stay well.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.